The courtroom was suffocatingly silent. A sea of faces filled the benches, reporters, families, strangers, curious to watch the trial of a black teenager accused of a crime so heavy it had made headlines for weeks. Dust motes drifted lazily in the shafts of daylight cutting through the tall windows, but the atmosphere was heavy, tense, as though the air itself held its breath. At the center of it all sat 17-year-old Michael Harris. His wrists rested on the wooden table before him, cuff marks still visible on his skin. His dark eyes, wide with exhaustion, flicked once toward the jury, then toward the judge's bench towering above him. He looked impossibly young in that oversized gray hoodie, the fabric wrinkled from too many nights on the cold bench of a cell. Yet there was no softness in the gaze fixed on him from above. Judge Whitmore, gray-haired, stern, his robe as black as his expression studied Michael, like a man staring at an insect under glass. For days, the defense had tried to speak, had tried to present evidence, had tried to bring forward witnesses who would testify to the boy's innocence. Every attempt had been cut down, objected to, overruled. The prosecution, by contrast, had been granted free rein. Long speeches, insinuations, character attacks masked as evidence. And now it was over. The gavel struck wood with a hollow crack. "Order," the judge commanded, though no one had made a sound. The silence was unbearable, stretching on until Whitmore's voice returned. Calm, even, cruelly certain. "The jury's recommendation has been noted. This court finds no reason to show leniency. The defendant, Michael Harris, is hereby sentenced to life in prison." The word hung in the air like a noose. Life. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Michael's mother stifled a cry, clutching at her chest. A reporter's pen scratched across a notepad. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Figures! What else could it be?" Michael did not flinch. He did not cry, though his heart thundered in his chest like it might burst through his ribs. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his eyes to the phone that sat on the defense table, confiscated but returned to him just before sentencing. His trembling fingers picked it up. The guards exchanged puzzled glances, but they did not stop him. What could he do with one phone call now? Michael unlocked it. His thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed a single name, saved under one word: Dad. The line rang. The judge's voice droned on in the background, reciting the formalities of the sentence. The crowd's whispers swelled. But Michael pressed the phone to his ear, his voice barely above a whisper. Dad. It happened. On the other end of the line, silence. Then a breath, deep and steady. "I'll take care of this," the voice said. Michael closed his eyes. The guards closed in to escort him away. And in that moment, no one in the room yet understood what the call meant. No one but him. Fade to black. The streets of Eastwood looked tired in the daylight. Broken sidewalks, shuttered storefronts, and graffiti on brick walls told the story of a community neglected for decades. Yet for Michael Harris, these streets were home. At 17, he was tall but wiry, with the restless energy of a boy still finding his place in the world. His hoodie was faded from too many washes, his sneakers scuffed but carefully kept clean. He had a smile that made his younger neighbors trust him, and a focus that made his teachers whisper that he was college material. Every afternoon, Michael practiced basketball with his high school team. On the court, he was fast, graceful, and disciplined, moving like the world outside those painted lines didn't exist. His coach often told him, "Keep this up, and you'll have a shot at scholarships." Michael believed him. He dreamed of escaping Eastwood, not to forget it, but to return someday as someone who had made it. His mother, Denise, worked double shifts at a nursing home. His father, well, nobody really knew. Michael rarely spoke about him. When asked, he would shrug, his eyes darting away, and change the subject. That Friday evening, practice ran late. The sky was painted gold with the setting sun as Michael walked home, his backpack slung over one shoulder, basketball under the other arm. His phone buzzed. Layla, his best friend, teasing him about missing a party. He laughed to himself, replying quickly, "Next time, I'm wiped." It was then that the patrol car pulled up. Two officers, both white, stepped out, their eyes locked on him like hunters spotting prey. "Michael Harris?" one asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Yes, sir," Michael said cautiously. "Backpack. Hand it over." Confusion rippled through him. "Why did I—" "Hand it over!" The officer's hand hovered near his holster. Heart pounding, Michael slowly set the basketball down and passed the bag. They unzipped it. Inside, to his horror, lay a small plastic bag of pills and a stolen wallet he had never seen before. Michael's eyes widened. "That's not mine. I swear, I don't know how that got there." The taller officer smirked, glancing at his partner. "Funny, they never do." Michael's breath came fast and shallow. "Check fingerprints. Test anything you want, please." Before he could finish, they spun him around, cuffed his wrists, and shoved him against the hood of the car. The metal was hot against his cheek. Neighbors peeked from windows. A woman across the street muttered, "Another one." Denise's voice echoed in his head. "Stay calm. Never fight back. Just get home safe." But safe was already slipping away. As they pushed him into the back seat of the cruiser, Michael caught a glimpse of his backpack lying open on the curb. His basketball rolled slowly into the gutter. The sirens blared. The car pulled away, carrying him not toward home, but into a storm he could never have imagined. Fade to black. The fluorescent lights of the Eastwood precinct hummed with a low, grating buzz. Michael sat at a metal table, his hands chained to a ring bolted in the center. The cuffs were too tight, biting into his skin, leaving red marks. He shifted uncomfortably, his throat dry, his heart still pounding from the shock of the arrest. The door creaked open. Two detectives walked in. The lead was a stocky man with thinning blonde hair and a smirk that seemed permanent. His partner was younger, quieter, but his eyes carried the same weight of judgment. "Well, well," the blonde one drawled. 17 years old and already a drug dealer and a thief. Must be something in the water where you live, huh?" Michael lifted his head. "That's not mine. Those things were planted." "Save it," the detective snapped, tossing a folder on the table. Inside were crime scene photos, evidence bags, reports. His name scrawled across them all. "We've got everything we need. You're done." Michael's chest tightened. "I want a lawyer." The younger detective laughed. "Kid, you don't need a lawyer. You need to tell us who you were working for. You give us names, maybe we go easy on you. Otherwise—" He leaned forward, voice dropping to a growl. "The judge is going to throw the book at you." "I don't have names," Michael insisted. His voice cracked, but his eyes held steady. "Because I didn't do it. Someone set me up." The blonde detective slammed his fist against the table, making the chain rattle. "You think anybody's going to believe that? A kid from Eastwood? You're lucky we're even listening." Michael bit his lip until he tasted blood. He thought of his mother's face, of Layla's laughter on the phone, of the basketball rolling into the gutter. The walls of the interrogation room seemed to close in tighter. After hours of relentless questioning, they led him to a holding cell. The metal door clanged shut behind him, echoing like a verdict. Inside, other young men sat slumped on benches, their eyes hollow, their stories untold. One of them glanced up, gave Michael a knowing look, and muttered, "First time? They don't care. You're just another number now." Michael sat in the corner, head in his hands. He replayed the arrest over and over, the way the officer smirked, the way the evidence appeared so conveniently. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about being who he was, where he was from, and the color of his skin. The next morning, they brought him to a small courtroom for a preliminary hearing. His court-appointed attorney, a middle-aged man with rumpled papers spilling from his briefcase, barely glanced at him. "Don't worry, kid. I'll try to get you a deal." "A deal?" Michael whispered harshly. "I didn't do anything." The lawyer shrugged. "You'd be surprised how often I hear that." When the prosecutor stood, his voice was confident, almost rehearsed. He described Michael as a dangerous influence, a repeat offender in the making, a threat to the community. The words poured out, shaping an image that bore no resemblance to reality. Michael's lawyer objected once, weakly, and was overruled. The judge hardly looked up from his notes. In that moment, Michael understood. This wasn't about truth. This wasn't about justice. The path was already laid out, and he was being dragged along it like a man chained to a train. As the session ended, he caught his mother's eyes in the back row. Tears streaked her cheeks. Her lips moved silently. "Hold on." Michael nodded faintly, even as his wrists were shackled again. The gavel came down. The next stage of the nightmare had begun. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of stone and glass, its flag snapping in the breeze. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps, the polished floors reflecting nervous faces. Michael was led in through a side door, wrists shackled, flanked by guards who didn't meet his eyes. The courtroom was larger than the one from the hearing, packed with spectators and reporters. Cameras weren't allowed, but pens scratched furiously across notepads. Michael felt the weight of hundreds of eyes as he was seated at the defense table. His attorney leaned over, his voice low and tired. "Don't talk unless I tell you to. And if the judge cuts us off, don't argue. Just keep your head down." Michael nodded, though every fiber of him wanted to scream. The doors at the back opened. Judge Whitmore entered, robes flowing, expression carved from stone. The bailiff called the room to order. Whitmore sat, eyes scanning the chamber, landing briefly on Michael. In that instant, Michael knew. The judge had already made up his mind. The prosecutor stood, a sharp-featured man with slicked back hair. His voice was calm, theatrical, designed for effect. "Ladies and gentlemen, today you will see the true face of danger lurking in our streets. 17 years old, yet already trafficking, stealing, poisoning his own community. Michael Harris is not a child. He is a criminal. And criminals must be stopped." Murmurs rippled through the room. Michael's stomach churned. When it was the defense's turn, his lawyer shuffled his notes, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Your Honor, the evidence against my client is circumstantial at best." "Overruled," Whitmore interrupted before the sentence was finished. The lawyer tried again, pointing out inconsistencies in the arrest. There were no fingerprints on the alleged evidence. "Overruled." Every attempt to raise doubt was cut down before it could take root. Each objection from the prosecution, however, was sustained. Witnesses for the defense were blocked on technicalities. A neighbor who had seen officers plant the bag was dismissed for being unreliable. A teacher prepared to testify about Michael's character was told her statement was irrelevant. It was like watching a play where every scene had been rehearsed in advance, every role already cast. Michael clenched his fists under the table. He could feel the eyes of the jury, some bored, some skeptical, a few clearly hostile. One man in the front row of jurors refused to look at him at all, his jaw tight with silent judgment. At recess, Michael's mother tried to approach him. The guards blocked her, but she called out anyway, her voice breaking. "Baby, stay strong. They don't know who you are." Her words pierced him, but the chains reminded him of reality. Back inside, the prosecutor brought forward a police officer. The man in uniform spoke with practiced confidence. "We found the evidence directly in the defendant's bag. He resisted arrest, appeared nervous, and tried to flee." "That's a lie!" Michael burst out before he could stop himself. "I never ran." "Order!" Judge Whitmore's gavel slammed down. His glare cut through Michael like a blade. "One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Do you understand?" Michael's throat tightened. He sank back into his chair. His lawyer whispered harshly, "Don't speak. You'll make it worse." But how could it get worse? The day dragged on, each witness painting Michael as something he wasn't. By the time court adjourned, the narrative was set. A dangerous boy from a dangerous neighborhood. As the guards led him out, Michael caught sight of his reflection in a hallway mirror. The hoodie, the cuffs, the bowed head. It was the image they wanted. Not the boy who studied late into the night. Not the player who dreamed of scholarships. Just another black teen to be swallowed by the system. Inside, fury burned. But so did resolve. He whispered under his breath, so low no one could hear. They think they know me. They don't. The fourth day of the trial felt more like a formality than a search for truth. The jury filed in, weary from hours of one-sided testimony. Michael sat motionless at the defense table, his cuffs hidden beneath the wood, his face drained but unbroken. His lawyer avoided eye contact, shuffling papers as though they might shield him from the inevitable. Judge Whitmore adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This court has heard enough," he announced. "The evidence is sufficient. The jury has delivered its recommendation." He paused, letting silence weigh heavy over the room. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Michael's mother, Denise, gripped the edge of the bench behind him, knuckles white, whispering prayers under her breath. Whitmore's gavel tapped once, deliberate and final. His voice came out steady, merciless. "The defendant, Michael Harris, is hereby sentenced to life in prison." The word thundered through the chamber. Life. Denise let out a strangled cry, collapsing into the arms of a neighbor. Layla, sitting beside her, covered her mouth with trembling hands. In the jury box, a few looked satisfied, others indifferent. Not one showed doubt. Michael sat still, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Life. At 17. For a crime he didn't commit. The judge continued his speech, droning on about law and order, protecting communities, sending a message. But Michael barely heard him. The words blurred into meaningless noise. He thought of the basketball court, of his dreams of scholarships, of the late-night talks with Layla about escaping Eastwood. He thought of his mother's tired smile after every shift, the way she whispered, "You're my hope," before falling asleep. All of it shattered in one word. But instead of breaking, something inside him hardened. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his head and looked straight at the judge. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm. "You don't know me." The guards shifted uneasily, unsure if they should silence him. The judge sneered but said nothing. Michael lowered his gaze to the table. His phone had been returned to him only moments earlier, a courtesy before he was taken away. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. The crowd murmured in confusion. Why allow this boy a call now, when his fate was sealed? He unlocked the screen. One name sat at the top of his contacts. Dad. He pressed it. The line rang once, twice. The sound was deafening in his ears, louder than the murmurs, louder than the judge's monotonous voice. On the third ring, someone answered. A deep, steady breath, then silence. Michael's throat tightened. His voice came out as barely a whisper. Dad, it happened. They gave me life. The silence on the other end stretched. Then the voice, calm and commanding, spoke. Stay strong, son, I'll handle this. Michael's eyes closed. A weight lifted from his chest, not hope, not yet, but certainty. Whatever came next, he would not face it alone. The guards moved to escort him out. The courtroom erupted, his mother screaming through tears, the prosecutor smirking in victory, the judge pounding his gavel to restore order. But Michael walked forward without resistance, cuffs rattling at his wrists, his face calm, because no one in the room knew who had just answered that call. The prison gates yawned open with a mechanical groan, swallowing Michael whole. The van rolled into the yard, the clang of steel doors closing behind it, echoing like a verdict that would never end. Guards barked orders, prisoners stared through fences, some jeering, some indifferent. Michael stepped out, chains clinking at his wrists and ankles. He tried to stand tall, but inside his chest, his heart hammered. He was only 17, yet they marched him through intake like he was already broken. Fingerprints, mugshot, orange jumpsuit replacing the hoodie his mother had washed 100 times. His basketball calluses were still fresh on his hands, but now those hands were shackled. The cell was small, concrete cold, the air damp and heavy. On the bunk across from him sat a man twice his size, tattoos crawling up his arms. The man studied him for a long moment, then said simply, "First time." Michael nodded. "They'll test you," the man warned. "If you fold, you're finished." That night, Michael lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The judge's words echoed over and over. Life. 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 Every syllable was a chain. But when his eyes closed, He remembered the phone call, his father's voice. "I'll handle this." Calm. Certain. A promise. Hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., a man in a tailored Navy suit stood by his office window, phone still in hand. The city stretched below him, monuments gleaming in the night. His reflection in the glass was hard, resolute. His chief of staff entered quietly. "Sir, we received a call from Eastwood. They've sentenced him." The man's jaw tightened. "Already?" "Yes. Life." For a moment, silence. Then the man set the phone down and turned. His presence filled the room. Papers on the desk bore the seal of the United States Department of Justice. His identity was still cloaked to us, but the weight of his authority was undeniable. "Prepare a file," he said. "Every document, every transcript, every shred of evidence from that trial. I want it tonight." The aide hesitated. "Won't that raise questions? People will notice." "Let them," he replied coldly. "If they've railroaded my son, they'll answer for it." Back in prison, Michael got his first taste of life behind bars. In the cafeteria, voices echoed, trays clattered, eyes followed him. A group of inmates cut him off in line, shoving his tray aside. He clenched his fists, ready to fight, but remembered the warning. If you fold, you're finished. Instead, he stood tall and walked past, ignoring their taunts. Later in the yard, another inmate approached, older with tired eyes but a steady voice. "You don't belong here, kid. They eat people like you alive. But if you keep your head, you'll survive long enough to see the truth come out." Michael met his gaze. "What truth?" The man shrugged. "That this system isn't built for people like us." Michael turned away, jaw tight. He already knew. In Washington, the man in the Navy suit studied the first pages of the file. Witnesses barred from testifying. Evidence logged without fingerprints. Police reports written hours before the arrest. His expression grew darker with each detail. "This isn't incompetence," he muttered. "This is deliberate." He picked up the phone again, dialing a number few people dared to call. "This is Harris. I need a team. Quiet, off the record, tonight." His voice was iron. And for the first time, the scales of justice began to tremble. The days blurred together inside the prison. Morning sirens, roll calls, tasteless food trays, shouts echoing down the hallways. For Michael, every minute felt like a test he hadn't studied for. On the second week, the test came. In the yard, a group of older inmates circled him. Their leader, a man with scars down his cheeks, sneered. "Fresh meat. You think you're going to walk around here with that clean face?" "No. You pay." Michael's heart raced. He thought of his mother, of Layla, of the judge's gavel slamming down. But he also remembered the words of the man on the bunk across from him. "If you fold, you're finished." So when the first punch came, Michael didn't cower. He ducked, scrambled, swung back with everything in him. He wasn't a fighter, not like them, but adrenaline fueled him. Guards rushed in, whistles shrieking. In seconds, it was over. Michael was dragged away, his lips split, his knuckles raw. Back in his cell, he pressed ice against his swollen face. His cellmate gave a low chuckle. "Not bad. You didn't win, but you didn't fold. That's how you survive." Michael leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. For the first time, a flicker of strength pulsed inside him. In Washington, the office lights burned late into the night. Harris still unnamed to the public, but moving like a man with command sat at his desk. Papers spread before him. The file grew uglier with each page. The arresting officer had a record of misconduct complaints, ignored. Evidence had been found after the search report was written. A key witness. Michael's coach had been dismissed without explanation. "This isn't negligence," Harris said quietly to his aide. "This is orchestration." His aide looked uneasy. "If you push this, sir, the local prosecutor's office will fight back. They'll claim you're interfering." Harris's eyes hardened. "Let them. I want to know who gave the order to bury my son." He picked up the phone again, this time calling someone higher. Someone with clearance. "This is Harris. Pull every communication between Eastwood PD and the DA's office for the last 6 months." "I don't care how classified." "Get it." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, this could get messy." "It's already messy," Harris snapped. "Do it." Back in prison, Michael lay awake. His cellmate snored on the top bunk, the air heavy with damp and sweat. Michael stared at the ceiling, whispering to himself, "I didn't do this. I don't belong here. Somebody has to believe me." The guard's footsteps echoed outside, steady, unbothered. Michael closed his eyes, clinging to the memory of the phone call. His father's voice, steady, certain. "I'll handle this." He didn't know how. He didn't know when, but he believed. At dawn, Harris received the first report. The documents laid bare a chain of emails. Pressure from the DA to make an example. Notes suggesting they had the right suspect regardless of technicalities. And attached, one chilling line from a senior officer. "The judge will take care of it. He always does." Harris's fist clenched around the paper. His son wasn't just railroaded. He was targeted. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. The reflection of the Capitol dome glowed in his window. "Time to make this public," he said. His voice was low, deadly calm. The prison walls pressed in tighter each day. Michael moved through routines like a ghost roll call, cafeteria, the yard. His spirit weighed down by the glares and the whispers. Some inmates respected him for holding his ground. Others saw him as weak, a boy who didn't belong. One afternoon in the yard, a guard slipped a note into Michael's pocket with a smirk. "From a friend," the man muttered before walking away. Michael unfolded the paper cautiously. Scrawled words chilled him. "Keep your mouth shut, forget the appeal, or you'll never walk out alive." His chest tightened. He crumpled the paper quickly, shoving it into his pocket, but the warning clung to him like chains heavier than the cuffs. That night, sleep didn't come. He sat on the cold bunk, staring into the darkness, wondering if even inside these walls he was safe. The memory of the judge's smirk returned, followed by the sound of his mother's sobs in court. For the first time since his arrest, Michael whispered to himself, "Maybe they've already won." In Washington, Harris studied the growing mountain of evidence in his office. The deeper his team dug, the clearer the picture became. Collusion between police, prosecutors, and Judge Whitmore. His aide entered, voice urgent. "Sir, this is bigger than one case. If you release this, you'll shake the whole state justice system." Harris's eyes darkened. "Good. It needs to be shaken. But sir, if they realize you're connected to Michael, they'll accuse you of abuse of power." Harris leaned forward across the desk, his voice low and unwavering. "They framed my son because of the color of his skin. They sentenced him to die in prison without a shred of truth. If I don't use every ounce of power I have, then I don't deserve this office." He paused, then added, "Start drafting the statement, but not under my name. Not yet. I want the story to break first." Meanwhile, Michael received his first letter. It was from Layla. Her handwriting was messy, but her words lit a small flame in him. "Don't give up. Everyone here knows you, knows your heart. If they think they've buried you, they don't know who they're dealing with. We're fighting for you out here." Michael held the letter like it was oxygen. The walls felt a little less heavy. That evening, a guard came to his cell. "You've got a visitor." Michael was led into a stark visiting room. On the other side of the glass sat a man in a dark suit. His presence filled the space, his eyes sharp and steady. Michael's heart jumped, though he said nothing. The man didn't introduce himself, didn't smile. He simply placed his hand on the glass, a silent promise. Michael did the same. No words passed, but the message was clear. You are not forgotten. When the guard led Michael away, whispers spread among the staff. Who was that man? Why did he command such gravity? Back in his office, Harris prepared. His aide placed the final draft of the statement on the desk. Harris read it once, twice, then set it down. Tomorrow, he said, the world starts to learn the truth. The prison cafeteria buzzed with noise trays clattering, voices echoing off the concrete walls. Michael sat alone at a corner table, picking at his food. He wasn't hungry. He hadn't been in days. Across the room, a group of inmates stared at him with sharp, cold eyes. One of them made a slicing motion across his throat. Michael looked away quickly, but the message was clear. The note in his pocket still haunted him. Keep your mouth shut, or you'll never walk out alive. Later that day in the yard, the threat became real. As Michael walked the perimeter, two men closed in on him. One whispered, "You should have kept quiet, kid." A fist flew toward his face. Michael stumbled back, dodging instinctively, but they pinned him against the fence. Just before the first blow landed, a whistle shrieked. Guards rushed in, breaking it apart. Michael was dragged back to his cell, bruised but breathing. The warning was no longer subtle. Someone wanted him silenced. That night, he pressed his palms against the wall, whispering a prayer. "Dad, I hope you meant what you said." In Washington, the storm was gathering. An investigative journalist at a major paper published a story. Evidence points to misconduct in Eastwood trial. The article outlined missing fingerprints, contradictory police reports, and questionable rulings by Judge Whitmore. Sources spoke anonymously, but the evidence was undeniable. The piece spread like wildfire across social media. Civil rights groups picked it up. Activists marched in front of the Eastwood courthouse, chanting Michael's name. Reporters crowded local officials, demanding answers. Inside his office, Harris read the article carefully. His aide entered, face pale. "Sir, this has blown up. The governor's office is calling. They want to know how much you're involved." Harris folded the paper neatly. "Tell them I'll make my position clear soon." "But sir, once they know—" "They'll know," Harris interrupted, his voice like steel. "Not yet, but soon." He turned back to the window, gazing out at the Capitol dome, shining in the evening light. Back in prison, Michael received another letter. This one wasn't from Layla, but from a stranger. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "We see you. We believe you. Don't let them break you. The world is watching now." Michael held the letter against his chest, fighting tears. For the first time, he felt the walls around him tremble, not from threats, but from the pressure of truth pushing in. In the silence of his cell, he whispered, Maybe they haven't won yet." Meanwhile, in Eastwood, Judge Whitmore faced reporters for the first time since the sentencing. His face was tight, his words measured. "This is an open and shut case. The boy is guilty. Any suggestion otherwise is media sensationalism. Justice was served." But as the cameras flashed, doubts flickered in the public eye. And in Washington, Harris prepared the next move, the one that would remove all doubt. Morning broke over Washington, gray clouds streaking the sky. Reporters swarmed the steps of the Department of Justice, their cameras aimed at the podium hastily erected overnight. Rumors had spread like wildfire. Someone high in the government was about to make a statement about the Eastwood case. No one yet knew who. Inside, Harris adjusted his tie before a mirror. For years, he had stood at podiums like this one, commanding the weight of law and order. But today was different. Today wasn't about policy or politics. Today was about his son. His aide hovered nervously nearby. "Sir, once you say it, there's no turning back. They'll accuse you of conflict of interest. They'll come after you personally." Harris straightened, his reflection firm and unshaken. "Let them. If I can't stand for my own son, I can't stand for anyone's." The aide nodded, stepping aside. The cameras clicked wildly as Harris emerged. His presence silenced the crowd. Reporters gasped, realizing who it was, the United States Attorney General himself. He took his place at the podium, scanning the sea of microphones and flashing lights. His voice was deep, steady, echoing across the plaza. 3 weeks ago, in Eastwood, a 17-year-old boy was sentenced to life in prison. His name is Michael Harris. He is my son. The crowd erupted shouts, questions, chaos. Harris raised a hand, commanding silence. My son was framed. The evidence was planted. The judge was biased. And the system, which is meant to serve justice, instead served prejudice. He lifted a folder high for all to see. These are the communications between Eastwood Police, the prosecutor's office, and Judge Whitmore. They speak for themselves. Deliberate collusion to secure a conviction, regardless of truth. Gasps rippled through the press. Cameras zoomed in on the stamped documents, the signatures, the damning words. Harris's voice sharpened. This is not only about my son. This is about every young black man who has been treated as guilty before being given a chance to be heard. This stops now. Behind him, officials from the Justice Department stepped forward. Federal investigations were already being launched. In Eastwood, the news hit like a thunderclap. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, chanting Michael's name, demanding the judge's removal. Protesters held signs, "Free Michael Harris and justice for all." Inside his cell, Michael sat stunned as guards hurried down the hallway, radios crackling with urgent voices. Another inmate whispered, "Yay, kid, that's your old man?" Michael pressed his palms against the cold wall, eyes burning with sudden tears. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope surged through him like fire. That evening, Judge Whitmore appeared on television, his face ashen. The governor's office announced a full investigation, and across the nation, the story dominated every headline. Attorney General's son framed. Systemic bias exposed. For Michael, the walls no longer felt permanent. They felt temporary, fragile, ready to fall. In the darkness of his cell, he whispered, "Dad, you kept your word." Eastwood Courthouse looked different now. Where once silence and indifference reigned, crowds surged with anger and chants. Protesters held up signs that read, "Justice for Michael," and "End biased courts." Reporters jostled for space on the courthouse steps. The same doors Michael had entered in chains now stood surrounded by people demanding his release. Inside, chaos spread like wildfire. Federal agents in dark jackets moved through offices, seizing files, collecting computers. Employees whispered nervously as boxes were carried out. The gray-haired prosecutor who had led the case against Michael tried to slip away unnoticed, but microphones and cameras cornered him. "Did you know the evidence was planted?" Reporters shouted. His face flushed red, his only answer, silence. Judge Whitmore himself sat behind his desk, pale and rigid, when federal marshals arrived. His voice shook with indignation. "This is outrageous. I am the law in this courtroom." "No," the lead agent replied, slapping a warrant down in front of him. "Not anymore." Whitmore's gavel, once the weapon that sealed Michael's fate, was placed in a plastic evidence bag. His hands trembled as cuffs closed around his wrists. For the first time, the judge's own reflection looked guilty. Meanwhile, in Washington, Harris stood before another bank of microphones. His words cut through the clamor. "My son will come home. But this case is bigger than him. We are opening a full-scale investigation into systemic bias in Eastwood and beyond. This will not stop with one conviction overturned. It will stop when no child has to fear being sentenced for the color of their skin." The crowd roared. Civil rights leaders flanked him, their faces alight with determination. In prison, Michael's name echoed down the hall. Guards came to his cell, their demeanor different, now less commanding, more cautious. "Harris, on your feet." His cellmate raised an eyebrow. "Told you, kid. Didn't belong here." Michael was led to a small room where his mother waited, her eyes full of tears, but her smile radiant. She rushed forward, clutching his face in her hands, as if to make sure he was real. "They can't keep you much longer," she whispered. "Your father. He shook the whole world for you." Michael swallowed hard. "I didn't know he could." His mother's voice softened. "He's been fighting his whole life, but this time, it was for you." They sat together, the sound of locks and keys still echoing faintly outside, but the weight of chains already lifting. Back at the courthouse, Layla stood among the crowd. She held up a hand-painted sign, "Free Michael." When she saw his name trending on every newsfeed, she whispered to herself, "They can't ignore us anymore." Her words felt like prophecy. The system that had tried to crush him was now bending under the light of truth. That night in his cell, Michael lay awake on the thin mattress. But for the first time, the ceiling didn't feel like a cage. Tomorrow or the next day, the bars would open, He pressed his palm to the wall and whispered, "I'm coming home." The morning sun poured through the narrow slit of a window in Michael's cell. For weeks, he had woken to the same routine doors clanging, guards barking orders, the shuffle of chains. But today, the footsteps outside his door carried a different weight. The lock turned, the door opened. "Harris," a guard said. His voice clipped, but softer than usual. "Pack your things. You're being released." Michael blinked, the words almost too heavy to believe. Released. At 17, after being told he would never walk free again. His hands trembled as he gathered his few belongings. A folded letter from Layla, a pencil stub, a crumpled drawing he had sketched on scrap paper. That was all he owned. In the hallway, prisoners leaned against the bars, watching him pass. Some jeered, others gave nods of respect. One older man muttered, "Walk tall, kid. You made it." Michael stepped through the gates that had swallowed him. The mechanical groan sounded different this time. No longer closing him in, but opening to let him out. The sun hit his face fully for the first time in months. It was blinding, glorious, real. Waiting beyond the gates was his mother. Denise rushed forward, tears streaming, pulling him into her arms with a strength that belied her exhaustion. She held him like she would never let go. "My baby," she sobbed. "You're free." Michael buried his face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of her clothes, the warmth of home. For a moment, the world faded until it was just them, mother and son, clinging to each other after surviving hell. Then a figure stepped closer. A man in a dark suit, posture steady, eyes firm. Michael froze, staring at him. His father. For years, Harris had been a shadow in his life, a distant presence spoken of in whispers. But now he stood before him, not just as a father, but as the Attorney General of the United States, the man who had torn down the walls of corruption to free his son. Michael's voice cracked. "Dad!" Harris's expression softened, just enough. He placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "I told you. I'd handle this." Michael looked at him with a mix of awe, confusion, and longing. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Harris sighed. "Because I didn't want you to grow up thinking you were protected by my name. I wanted you to know your strength came from you." And it did. Michael swallowed hard. For the first time, he understood. Reporters stood beyond the barricades, cameras flashing wildly. Shouts filled the air. "Attorney General's son freed. What comes next for Eastwood? Will there be charges against the judge?" But for Michael, the noise melted away. He stood between his parents, his mother's tears on one side and his father's firm hand on the other. For the first time in weeks, he felt whole. The gates clanged shut behind him. But he was no longer inside them. Step by step, Michael walked forward, each footfall heavy with meaning. Out of the prison. Out of the nightmare. Into the light. The neighborhood of Eastwood had never been louder. Word of Michael's release had spread faster than the morning sun. Neighbors poured into the streets, some clapping, some simply staring in stunned silence. Children darted between legs, chanting his name as though he were a hero returned from battle. Michael stepped out of the car, blinking against the daylight. The familiar streets looked different now. They were still worn graffiti, still lined the walls, sidewalks still cracked. But today, they shone with something new. Pride. His mother kept close, never letting go of his hand. Layla rushed forward, throwing her arms around him. "I told you not to give up," she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael hugged her back tightly. "Your letters kept me breathing," he said. Then, he turned to the man who stood a few paces back. His father, the Attorney General, kept his expression controlled, but his presence was impossible to ignore. Reporters hung at the edges of the crowd, their cameras pointed like weapons, waiting for a quote. But Harris didn't speak. For now, he was only a father, watching his son take his first steps of freedom. Inside their small home, the smell of Denise's cooking filled the air. The old TV still flickered with the day's news. The headline scrolled across the bottom, "Eastwood judge indicted for misconduct. Federal investigation expands." Michael sat at the kitchen table, the same place he had eaten countless meals, before everything was stolen from him. His chair felt both familiar and strange. He touched the scarred wood, remembering nights when he studied here, dreaming of college. "This place didn't change," he murmured. "No," his mother replied, her eyes soft. "But you did." He looked down at his hands. The bruises from prison fights were still healing, the cuts still raw, but they were steady hands that had carried him through fear, anger, and despair. Later that night, he walked to the basketball court. The chain-link fence rattled in the breeze, the pavement cracked, the hoop rusted. A ball rolled toward him, and he picked it up instinctively. His fingers curled around it, muscle memory guiding him. He bounced once, twice. The sound echoed in the still air. He took a shot. The ball arced high and swished cleanly through the net. For the first time in months, he smiled. Layla appeared at the fence, calling softly, "So, what now?" Michael caught the ball, holding it under his arm. His gaze drifted to the horizon where city lights glowed faintly. "They tried to take my life," he said quietly, "but truth gave it back. And now, I need to use it." She tilted her head. "How?" Michael's eyes hardened, but his voice was steady. "By making sure nobody else goes through what I did. If they can frame me, they can frame anyone. That has to change." He shot again, another swish. The screen faded slowly as his voice carried over. "They said life. They thought it meant an end. But to me, it means a beginning.